Audrey Hepburn is often remembered through a handful of indelible images: a little black dress against a New York dawn, a mischievous smile in a Roman piazza, a delicate face framed by perfect brows and impossible grace. Yet the truth behind the icon is more layered and more human than any pose could promise. She was a child who learned resilience under occupation, a dancer whose body remembered hunger, an actress whose modesty deepened her magnetism, a mother who protected ordinary joys, and a humanitarian who turned fame into a tool for children. This is the story of how elegance met empathy, and why her light still travels so far. She was born Audrey Kathleen Rustin on May 4, 1929, in Ixelles, a municipality of Brussels. Her family background was transnational and, in some ways, contradictory: a Dutch Baroness mother, Ella van Heemstra, with old European roots, and a British father, Joseph Rustin, whose sense of identity would become complicated by claims of aristocratic lineage. The family moved between Belgium, England, and the Netherlands, a carousel of languages and customs that enriched Audrey's early years. It seemed a privileged childhood from a distance, yet the winds of the 1930s were already shifting. When war darkened Europe, the moves that had once seemed cosmopolitan became acts of caution and survival. In the Netherlands, the war pressed its full weight onto everyday life. To hide her English ties, the girl with bright eyes and long limbs became Theta, speaking only Dutch in public and learning early the discipline of restraint. Food grew scarce, fear became a neighbor, and the sound of tanks rewrote the map of childhood. She studied ballet as strength allowed, dancing in small performances that sometimes raised money for resistance efforts, each ply intended to a quiet defiance against a larger terror. Malnutrition left marks that would never entirely fade: swollen legs, anemia, a knowledge of hunger that later shaped her sense of duty. The war taught her what deprivation feels like from the inside, and that lesson, more than any film, would decide what she did with the second half of her life. When peace haltingly returned, Audrey chased the dream that had steadied her through the darkest months: ballet. In Amsterdam she trained with Sonia Gaskell, then in London with Marie Rambert. Teachers admired her musicality, discipline, and soulfulness, but ballet is a demanding arithmetic of body and time. Years of wartime deprivation had taken their toll, the physical margins for prima roles were narrow. She was told the truth that disappoints and frees, that her artistry could flourish elsewhere. The loss of that first dream gave her something paradoxically invaluable: a humility that would anchor the fame to come, and a dancer's instincts that would make the camera feel like a partner, not a judge. Work came first in chorus lines and supporting parts, the kind of roles that teach consistency more than glory. She learned the invisible crafts: how to hit a mark without looking, how to listen on screen, how to do nothing with intention so that the frame fills with presence. A small film in Monaco changed everything. While working on a light comedy, she met the novelist Colette, who saw in this shy young woman a rare mix of innocence and clarity. Colette pushed for her to play Gigi on stage. On Broadway, audiences felt what Colette had sensed: the charm was not an act, and the vulnerability was not weakness. The applause that followed wasn't just for a performance, it was a recognition. She was, unmistakably, a star. Hollywood called with a fairy tale that required something more than sparkle. In Roman Holiday, she played a princess who longs to be simply a girl for one day. The role worked because she understood the gravity inside whimsy. When her character walks Rome with a journalist and tastes freedom in small bites: gelato, a haircut, a scooter ride, Audrey let the audience see the cost of enchantment. The camera loved her, but it was her honesty that earned devotion. Awards followed, doors opened, and studios moved quickly to harness a phenomenon. Yet what made her new wasn't only freshness, it was an unguarded kindness that read as modern. At a time when screen sirens often smoldered, Audrey's light was bright, direct, and humane. Style attached itself to her the way a melody can attach to a moment. Collaborations with costume legends refined an image that would ripple through decades: clean lines, unforced elegance, silhouettes that made simplicity feel like a luxury. The friendship with Hubert de Givenchy became one of fashion's great partnerships, not because he decorated her, but because he understood her. Clothes became a language, boat necklines that emphasized the lift of her collarbones, cropped cigarette pants that allowed movement, the little black dress that turned minimalism into myth. She didn't invent grace. She localized it, proving that restraint can be more provocative than ornament. Her career balanced light and weight with instinctive timing. She could move like a dancer in one film and wrestle with the textures of conscience in the next. Dancing and singing alongside Fred Astaire let her honor the first art she loved, and audiences understood the lines of her arms, the rhythm in her walk, the natural phrasing of a gesture. All of it came from years at the bar. Then, in a performance of quiet intensity, she became a nurse in a story of vocation and doubt. That role revealed a depth critics had intuited but not yet witnessed in full. She refused to be only delightful, she insisted on being true. It is one thing to be adored, it is another to be respected. She became both. Breakfast at Tiffany's crystallized an icon. Holly Golightly, with her pearls and wistful bravado, was a paradox, dazzling and lonely, mercurial and frightened, audacious and tender. The film's opening image. A woman with coffee and croissant gazing at a jewelry window, wasn't a fashion moment so much as a thesis. We project dreams onto glass, and reflections always carry our own faces back to us. Audrey walked the fine line between charm and ache so delicately that the world barely saw the wire. The movie recalibrated fashion, re-enchanted New York, and gave modern audiences a heroine who wasn't rescued so much as recognized. Across the 1960s, she darted between capers and metamorphoses, partnering with leading men whose names still anchor cinema's pantheon. There was a thriller that flirted like a waltz, a rags to radiance transformation that mirrored her ascent, and a heist played as a smile. Even when scripts did not fully deserve her, she made them better, not by effortful strain but by removing effort from the image. Ease became her signature. The camera trusts what it cannot catch someone trying to sell. Beyond work, life asked for different kinds of courage. She wanted a home life not as a public performance but as a private fact. Marriage, miscarriages, and the tender labor of motherhood reordered her priorities. She chose to work less, not as a retreat but as a reframing. The center of meaning shifted from marquee to kitchen table, from premiere to bedtime story. In a profession that often demands perpetual self-display, she chose boundaries. Distance only made audiences love her more, scarcity added value to every appearance. When she returned to more adult material, it was with a matured gaze. A road movie about a marriage told across braided timelines let her explore love's cycles, enchantment, erosion, choice. It was honest without bitterness, affectionate without illusion. Later roles arrived more sparingly, as if she were picking up only the shells that still sang when held to the ear. The myth of Audrey Hepburn remained on posters and in magazines, but the woman moved beyond it, not disdainfully but gently, like outgrowing a favorite dress. The most important act of her third act was not on a soundstage. Memories of wartime scarcity never left her, and when the chance came to lend her voice to children who had no microphone, she accepted. As a goodwill ambassador, she visited clinics, camps, and villages. Her presence drew cameras, but she made sure the cameras turned toward the faces that matter. She spoke plainly, asked practical questions, and treated suffering not as an abstraction but as a solvable problem. The same composure that once made her luminous on film now made her credible in the field. She knew how to carry attention without devouring it, how to translate compassion into momentum. Awards and honors punctuated those years, but the real measure lay in vaccinations delivered, kitchens funded, and policy shifted by a clear-eyed witness who had learned the world's fragility early. Illness found her in later life, and she met it with the quiet courage that had always been her counterpoint to glamour. Surrounded by family and the landscapes she loved, she showed the same restraint in departing that she had shown in arriving. No theatrics, no grand announcements, just the continuance of a consistent life, dignity, kindness, and devotion to causes larger than self. The public grieved the star, those who had been fed, treated, or simply seen grieved a champion. What remains now is not only a filmography but a way of walking through the world. She taught that elegance is not a performance but a habit of care, that beauty without goodness is a costume, and that fame is not a throne but a lever, useful only when it moves weight on behalf of others. The dresses are still copied, the brows still referenced, the roles still screened, yet what endures most is the sense that gentleness can be strong, that restraint can be radiant, that joy can be ethical. She showed how to collapse the distance between art and life until each instructs the other. There are many ways to measure a legacy. One is to count awards, she had plenty. Another is to trace influence. Designers, actresses, and audiences continue to borrow her lines and light. But a better measure might be to follow the ripples, a girl who watches Breakfast at Tiffany's and feels seen in her contradictions, a nurse who chooses compassion over speed because a film once honored that choice, a donor who signs a check because a familiar face explained why it matters, a child who grows up because vaccines reached a village on time. These are not glamorous images, but they are the ones she worked hardest to create. If cinema crowned her, it was because she earned it. If time keeps her, it is because she deserved it. Audrey Hepburn's story begins with a child who learned to be brave before she learned to be famous and ends with a woman who knew that the real glamour is service. The icon is easy to draw, a black dress, a long neck, a luminous gaze. The woman is harder to summarize and more rewarding to know, disciplined, empathetic, unpretentious, and profoundly effective. In the light she left behind, strangers still find their way. That, more than any role, is why her name continues to glow.